Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 170 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. It's been a little while, thanks to my December break, plus 6 weeks of Loki episodes, so you may have forgotten, but before all of that, I was in the middle of a series of episodes discussing the various Green Lantern replacements. Guy Gardner, who is set to be played by Nathan Fillion in the upcoming DCU movies, and John Stewart, the GL of the Justice League in the DC animated universe, have already been touched on. Now we have reached the man who starred in the Green Lantern title longer than anyone else save Hal, the Green Lantern of the 1990s, Kyle Rayner. Now, before we go into Kyle's in-universe story, let's look a little at where the comic book industry, and specifically DC Comics, were at this point in time. The early 90s were a period of extreme success for the comic book industry. Collectors who had fled the sports card market after that bubble burst started buying comics as the next big investment, especially books they saw as important, whether that be because of a special cover, a new #1 issue, or, most relevant to this episode, a crucial event. The death of Superman hit at just the right time to capitalize on this, plus the extra fortune of a reasonably slow news week, and sold over 6 million copies. DC repeated the success to a certain extent with the Nightfall story in Batman, crippling Bruce Wayne and replacing him with Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael. Chasing this dragon, DC next turned to Green Lantern as the old classic to get the replacement treatment. Before 1995 was over, Wonder Woman and Green Arrow were also replaced. Commercially and critically, none of these were ever as successful as the original, of course. The story that took Hal out of the book was different from the rest of these, however. Hal wasn't killed off or critically injured, as happened with most of the others, Wonder Woman being the only other exception. Instead, writer Ron Mars, with pencilers Bill Willingham, Fred Haynes, and Darryl Banks, wrote a story where Hal Jordan went insane and turned villainous. As I mentioned briefly way back in episode 15, dealing with Superman's replacements from the Death and Return of Superman story, Hal's hometown of Coast City was destroyed by Mongol during the Return of Superman storyline. Hal was off-world at the time and was devastated to learn of the death of so many people. In his grief, he started to believe that he could use the ring to bring everyone back. While he was able to briefly restore an illusion of Coast City and its inhabitants, the ring's charge ran out quickly. He pleaded with the Guardians to give him the power to make it permanent, but instead they called him out for using the ring for personal gain and recalled him to Oa for disciplinary action. Hal rejected this, and while he did return to Oa, it was with the intention of walking into the central battery and taking all of that power for himself. Hal killed or maimed several other Green Lanterns on the way there, and even killed his old arch-nemesis Sinestro, who the Guardians had freed from his prison in exchange for stopping Hal's rampage. Hal took the power and flew off, later returning in the 0 Hour crossover, where he tried to restart the universe, believing he could fix all of the mistakes that had happened. Coast City's destruction being the foremost motivation. Meanwhile, most of the Guardians of the Universe died when Hal had taken the power of the central battery, but one survived. Ganthet, the only Guardian who had a name at the time, formed one more Green Lantern ring, flew to Earth, and seemingly handed it to the first person he saw, saying, "You shall have to do." That person ended up being freelance graphic artist Kyle Rayner, who decided to use his new powers to both become a hero and to help his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Alex DeWitt, who was trying to become a successful photojournalist, similar to the way Peter Parker had exclusive access to pictures of Spider-Man. Now, in episode 71, I went into the death of Alex DeWitt in great detail, and how much more important it ended up being in our universe than it was the DCU. If you don't recall that, I highly recommend going back to that episode and taking a listen. Kyle's background as an artist became one of the signature attributes of his tenure as a hero. He first uses his graphic design background to create a costume that was significantly different from his predecessor. Although, judging from the reaction of some fans at the time, perhaps that was not the best first showing, with the nascent internet giving him the semi-affectionate nickname of Crab-Faced Guy, due to his overbuilt mask. With the Green Lantern ring able to create whatever his imagination can come up with, Kyle's constructs ended up being a lot more creative than the giant boxing gloves and other simple creations that Hal was best known for. It's been stated that his constructs fade in like a pencil sketch before manifesting their full form. Kyle stayed the star of the Green Lantern title from issue number 51 all the way up to the final issue of that volume, number 181. His co-creator, Ron Mars, wrote about 2/3 of those issues, with Judd Winnick handling the bulk of the remainder. In that time, he had plenty of adventures on Earth and in space. During his 2 extended tenures in space, he was able to create a second Green Lantern ring, which he gave to Jade, his then-girlfriend and daughter of Golden Age Green Lantern Alan Scott, for one stretch, then to John Stewart for another. We'll talk more about Jade in a little bit. Finally, years later, in Green Lantern Rebirth, writer Jeff Johns came up with a way to return Hal Jordan, as well as the Green Lantern Corps, which was all but extinct. Kyle's tenure as the sole Green Lantern was recognized by the Guardians, granting him the title of Torchbearer. While Hal took over the new volume of the Green Lantern title, Kyle continued to be a major player in the Green Lantern Corps, and proved to be special in other ways, playing host to the embodiment of willpower named Ion. Rebirth had established an embodiment of fear named Parallax that had infected Hal and been the actual cause for his villainous turn. This retconned an earlier stint Kyle had as Ion during his ongoing series. Kyle eventually gave up the power of the creature and returned to being a standard Green Lantern, albeit as an Honor Guard member with special rank and privileges due to his Torchbearer status. In addition to hosting the power behind the Green Lantern Corps, in a later story, Kyle was possessed by Parallax, similar to Hal Jordan, and in more recent tales, gained the ability to wield any of the colors of the emotional spectrum. Check episode 122 if you need a refresher on those. And he became a White Lantern. However, he once again was reverted back to a Green Lantern after attempting to revive the Blue Lantern Corps and being blocked by some unknown force. In recent months, the Green Lantern Corps was once again disbanded following an attack by that force, leaving only a few of them still alive. Kyle is currently listed as missing in action, but I'm sure one writer or another will want to pick up his story down the line, so it's only a matter of time before the Torchbearer returns once again. As I mentioned earlier, Kyle briefly gave a backup ring and battery to his then-girlfriend Jade, aka Jennifer Lynn Hayden. Her tenure as a Green Lantern has been all but forgotten, so I wanted to make sure she gets mentioned this episode. Jade's name is very appropriate, as she was born with green skin and hair. Although her powers didn't fully manifest until she was a teenager, she was born a metahuman, with access to the power of the Starheart, a magic crystal that was the source of her father's powers, as well as being able to manipulate plants and photosynthesize thanks to the chlorophyll in her blood, inherited from her mother, Rose Canton, who was also the villain known as Thorn due to her dissociative identity disorder. Jennifer and her twin brother Obsidian, or Todd James Rice in his civilian identity, were given up for adoption to separate families because of Alan's fear that Thorn would kill the children, but eventually they reunited with each other and later their father. Jade lost her powers for a time, which is when Kyle offered her the Green Lantern ring. During his first stint with the powers of Ion, Kyle revived Jade's powers. She continued to help Kyle for a time, even briefly joining him in space during his second self-exile. But she returned home and ended her relationship with him after falling in love with another man. She joined the team known as the Outsiders, and was also part of the team that defeated the Parallax entity in the Green Lantern Rebirth story. Unfortunately, she died during Infinite Crisis, with her Starheart powers merging with Kyle, reawakening his Ion abilities. Jade was one of a few characters fully resurrected in the finale of the Blackest Night storyline, and rekindled her relationship with Kyle at this time. She had some further adventures, mostly involving the Starheart crystal that gave her her powers, turning against her and other heroes connected to the relic. Then, with the New 52 reboot, Jade, along with other characters that were part of or connected to the Justice Society of America, were erased from continuity. Thanks to Rebirth and the reboot of the multiverse following the Dark Knight storyline, Jade has been returned along with her father and brother, and other JSA characters. Although we haven't seen much of her since the story in Infinite Frontier, where she disappeared, and through the investigation of that disappearance by Alan and Obsidian, a multiversal conspiracy was uncovered and stopped. While she did return to Earth at the end of that story, we haven't seen much of her in the DCU since, not even appearing in the new Justice Society book as of this recording. But given her rich connection to the history of the DCU, I'm sure it won't be long before she makes another important appearance. That wraps up this week's episode. Thank you for listening. There's still 3 more Green Lanterns of Section 2814 to cover, which will take either 2 or 3 more episodes of the show to wrap this series up. But once that's done, I'll be looking for new topics to cover, and would love to hear from you on what you want to know more about in the comic book world, or other geeky subjects. You can email any of those, along with comments on the show in general, to welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown, Twitter @geektownpodcast, Mastodon @welcometogeektown, @mastodon.social, or Blue Sky @welcometogeektown.bluesky.social. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, why not become a patron at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Centeno. All other sound clips of the copyrighted material, their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.